Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday. Another day that we're at least not yet offensively involved in this war, but all signs not pointing in a particularly good direction. What do we have, Krystal?
Yeah, we've got all the latest. Obviously, Trump made a bunch of comments yesterday in the Oval Office, so we'll show you a mashup of that and everything else that we can pull for you to give you an indication of where things may be headed. We're also taking a look at DNI Tulsi Gabbard and what is being reported as an increasingly strained relationship in the White House. Some interesting things to dig into there. Inside of Israel, they are ratcheting up the censorship. In fact, we have a report this morning that an Al Jazeera photographer was detained over daring to show some of the missile damage that Iran was able to inflict. Also, a hospital inside of Israel was struck, and there's a bunch of other details there, too, for us to get into. The full Tucker versus Ted Cruz interview is out. We've got a bunch of clips for you. I know you've already seen. Ryan and Emily covered a few of them. There's a number more that are, if anything, even more extraordinary. So we'll break those down for you. I think you'll enjoy watching all of that. I certainly did. We also have pulled the latest polling to try to read the tea leaves about how people feel about potential offensive war, like us getting directly involved in terms of war with Iran. So some very contradictory indications there. Saurabh Mari is going to join us. He wrote a fantastic piece about what people should know about Iran and how a regime change or regime collapse would likely go, given his extensive knowledge of that nation. And we had to get to this one. Obama has joined the chat. He has some comments to offer us from on high, so you always have to pay attention.
The great sage has decided to descend back amongst his people and to issue an edict. He thinks he's like a pope or something like that and not an elected leader. But anyways, thank you to everybody. We have had so many people joining the show, which is so gratifying. I think I said in our last show, this is literally some of the most important work I think that we'll ever do here. So thank you to everybody who's subscribing and to helping out the show. BreakingPoints.com if you want to become a member and you can support us. Otherwise, just do us a favor. Go ahead and hit subscribe on YouTube for the channel. And if you're listening to this on a podcast, please go ahead and follow. Give us a 5-star rating. But really, honestly, the most important thing you could do is share the show with a friend. Text the link to a friend. Put it on your Instagram story, something like that. We really appreciate it. But yeah, let's go ahead and get to the latest comments, what we know right now from Donald Trump.
Yeah, so Trump making a bunch of different statements, some of them somewhat contradictory. Let's go ahead and take a listen to a bit of what he had to say.
They should have made the deal. I had a great deal for them. They should have made that deal. 60 days we talked about it, and in the end they decided not to do it, and now they wish they did it. And they want to meet, but it's a little late to meet, but they want to meet, and they want to come to the White House. They'll even come to the White House. So we'll see. I may do that, but it's a shame it could have been done the easy way. And it's interesting because I did ask Tucker, I said, well, are you okay with nuclear weapons being in the hands of Iran? And he sort of didn't like that. He didn't want to really, but he sort of didn't like that. And I said, well, if it's okay with you, then you and I do have a difference. But it's really not okay with him. Therefore, you may have to fight. And maybe it'll end very quickly. But there's no way that you can allow, whether you have to fight or not, you can allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon because the entire world will blow up. He said I was going back home to make a ceasefire. Not a ceasefire. We're long beyond ceasefire. And I said, why do you say that? Why would you say ceasefire? It's a bad term to use because a ceasefire means like everything's going swimmingly, we'll take a little time off. It's not. We're not looking for a ceasefire. We're looking for a total, complete victory. Again, you know what the victory is. No nuclear weapon.
It's Iran and their proxies who have threatened to retaliate against you and your team by killing you guys for taking out Soleimani.
Well, they haven't done that, and that would be a terrible thing for them to do. Not because of me. If they did that, they would be obliterated. That'd be the end. I've left instructions.
About Vance and the process we're going to talk about?
It's about anybody. They even suggested they come to the White House. It's a big difference. But they've suggested that they come to the White House. That's, courageous, but, it's like not easy for them to do.
So he says there he wants total and complete victory. And if we could actually jump ahead to A2, some of the latest reporting. And guys, I want you to take everything that comes out of his mouth, comes out of literally any media outlet with a million grains of salt, because all of this is, incredibly strategic. Is it the truth? Is it not the truth? Who knows? But this is information that the White House wanted to be put out there. Trump privately approved of attack plans for Iran, but has withheld the final order. President Trump told senior aides late Tuesday he approved of attack plans for Iran, was holding off to see if Tehran would abandon its nuclear program. People familiar with the deliberations said Iran's well-defended Fordo enrichment facility is a possible U.S. target buried under a mountain, generally considered by military experts to be out of reach of all but the most powerful bombs. So, Saagar, that is the latest in terms of White House statements.
Look, nobody knows. And this is the thing with Trump himself. Simultaneously, he's saying, let's go ahead and invite the Iranians to the White House. The Iranian mission at the United Nations denied that report, saying that actually that's not happening. We do know the Iranian foreign minister has been in somewhat intermittent communication with Steve Witkoff. To what end? Again, very unclear. There was 2 planes that took off yesterday from Tehran to Doha, carrying some Iranian negotiators. There's been no announcement from the United States. Steve Witkoff is meeting with them. The Iranian foreign minister will meet with European Union foreign ministers today at some point in a public forum, and Iran has requested a meeting at the UN Security Council, basically to connect. None of that is going to necessarily do anything, but we knew that there's some diplomacy. Basically, every single day that the sun rises on Tehran, I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe, but at the same time, you do see some very troubling statements here from the president, and let's just put, this whole Trump has greenlit the attack, but hasn't given the final order. I mean, let's listen very carefully to the words that he is saying. He's saying, clearly, I want unconditional surrender. Unconditional surrender to Donald Trump means he said, put your hands up and say, I've had enough, and let us bomb your nuclear facilities. That's his version of unconditional surrender. Not even saying, put your hands up and say, okay, fine, we agree not to enrich any more uranium whatsoever. And we can get into the whole IAEA thing and all of that if we would like to, but this is a very important point. And here again, I ask for strategic empathy. This is not in any way empathetic on a personal level to the Iranian regime. The Iranian regime participated in a nuclear deal with Obama that was thrown out. Then they participated, maybe in good faith, maybe not, but at least in some serious negotiations with the United States of America. And then our president basically publicly acclaimed that those negotiations were a ruse for an Israeli military campaign. Now, as we know right now, the Iranian nuclear program has been degraded, but is in no way shut down. So put yourself in that situation where you're being asked for, quote, unconditional surrender when your regime is basically under attack. All Israeli military action at this point points in only one direction, which is straight up regime change. We saw everybody yesterday, all of those strikes, that the hacking of their broadcast systems, which we'll show everybody in a little bit. But I just think we should all put that together and say, look, it's pretty clear here that the Ayatollah doesn't have a lot of political maneuver in terms of the validity of his own regime to accept some sort of unconditional surrender. And Israel actually came out with a public statement telling the United States there is no need to negotiate whatsoever, right, telling us what to do. So I think we should put all that together. And look, I mean, there is a box that we have been painted in now by the Israelis. It's probably never made more sense for Iran to sprint to a nuclear weapon than right now, because that would be the only credible deterrence that they have. So they have sped up the calculus, both on their part and on our part. Again, this is not to say this is good or bad. This is just purely analytical. And we can look through a lot of history to show us why, various actors might act in a certain way. So you put all that together, and I mean, I continue to think I do not see a way out for offensive military action. I just don't. It would genuinely have to be a true black swan event. And then we also have to think about the Iranians. I mean, at this point, if you did, accept so-called unconditional surrender, I mean, what would stop Israel from attacking you in the future? You have no credible deterrent threat. You're just a rump state, and actually you're ripe for takeover from within, because what segment of the Iranian military or hardliners would even accept that level of humiliation on a national level? I mean, you really do have to put all this together and be like, look, everybody's acting rationally, like in their own interest. Bibi's doing this to preserve his coalition and because he wants America to support him. America, Trump says, I don't don't want them to have any nuclear weapon. And Iran is like, well, you've boxed us into a corner. And right now, there's only one regime on the planet threatened by the United States for having a nuclear weapon that survives to this day. Its name is North Korea. Why does it survive? Because it has a nuclear weapon. Yep. The logic of it all is circular, and it all points to war.
Yeah. Skip ahead to A6. This is Ken Klippenstein's report about regime change. And according to Ken, the decision has already been made. He says Trump secretly greenlit Iran war. Israel wants regime change. The U.S. is fine with that, according to his sources. I spoke with Ken yesterday to see if he had any updates here. And he said, listen, it's possible that Trump decides that he, rather than the U.S. being directly offensively involved, loads Israel up with all the weapons they would need and just lets them do it. And it kind of depends, and this is like the insanity of this particular president, it kind of depends on if he thinks that'll look like cool and tough for it to be us doing it, or whether he wants to just let the Israelis handle it. In the end, the difference makes no difference. It is us, ultimately. If we're providing the weapons, if we're giving the go-ahead, it's us, whether it's our pilots or their pilots, directly dropping out of our jets or theirs. So, that's, I think, the direction that we're heading in. That's the only question. And the reason I say that is because you guys probably saw that report, that the reason he decided to more aggressively take credit is because he saw the coverage on Fox News and he thought it looked cool and badass and he wanted to claim credit. So that's the level that we're dealing with here. I mean, totally unserious, just based on a whim, based on vanity. And, the real original sin is when he gets out of the JCPOA in his first term. But the more immediate sin, and this is according to Trita Parsi's analysis, which I think is correct, is when he allows himself to be shifted from, okay, we can work with you on uranium enrichment. Witkoff had some genuinely creative ideas about a regional consortium and, okay, how can we make this work, to adopting the hardliners' position of absolutely zero enrichment. There was only one reason that the Israelis and the hardliners were trying to put that requirement into place. They knew it would be a poison pill. They knew it would kill the negotiations, and they knew it would bring us to exactly the place we are in right now. But I do not want anyone to be under any illusions that we're like being dragged into it or whatever. Ken also has an interesting part in this report where he says this is something the Israelis have been planning for years now. And under the Biden administration, they tried to get the green light. Biden said no because he was concerned about what the fallout would be. And maybe he actually knew that there were 90 million or someone around who knew that there were 90 million people in Iran. You kind of got to think about how this is all going to work out. He at least had enough concerns to hold the Israelis off from launching these attacks. Trump, I think, held them off for a while and then got to a place where, okay, go ahead, do it.
Look,
and then decides he wants to get all the way in because it looks cool and badass.
There's only two options. He either got suckered in or he approved it, at a level of like conscious thinking. Both are terrible, actually. I would say suckered in is probably worse just because that says a lot about his own judgment. Let's put A3, please, up on the screen. I just want to continue to point everybody in the precipice of the direction of where we are. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, put his own cabinet on alert for a potential U.S. attack on Iran. It is very likely that we would alert our NATO, or at least some very, very close Five Eyes allies about this. There's been some speculation that it would require the United States to take off from a British military base for the B-2 to actually succeed in some sort of attack on the Fordo facility if we wanted to launch via the Indian Ocean. So it's very possible there as well. Remember, the UK also assisted in shooting down missiles in April against Iran, and it's obviously somebody who has been supporting the United States. And by the way, Keir Starmer also just met with Donald Trump, a few days ago in Canada at the G7. Another major indication, let's put A4, please, on the screen. U.S. diplomats have been authorized to leave the U.S. embassy in Israel and are now being flown out of the country by U.S. military. So that's a very troubling sign in terms of where things are, basically in a total evacuation at a military level here of the actual the non-essential diplomatic corps inside of Israel. You also see the beginning and the resumption of some flights for U.S. Citizens who are inside of Israel via United States planes and others. So they are preparing at the very least for a full-blown military campaign. That is not even to mention the multiple military assets on the way. I mean, I don't think people understand that we have 3 carrier strike groups on the way to the Middle East. That's crazy. Like, that is a level of military force that you would expect for an invasion of Iran, just in terms of all of what we had around there, because that is just the full force of all of these guided, the missile destroyers and others, and the platform, the aircraft, refueling tankers, as well as a naval base in Bahrain. There's been some stuff going on at the air base in Qatar. I mean, there is just this is stuff we have not seen in the region since Iraq, like this level of military equipment and sheer presence in the Middle East. I would also tell you it costs about $250,000 per month to sustain a single carrier strike group just over this. So let's factor that into the bill. And also there is the case also of these had jobs elsewhere. One of them is literally brought from the Indo-Pacific. So, okay, glad nothing important is going on over there in terms of this region. So the cost benefit on this is huge. And even just the sheer cost of actually sustaining the deployment and also the things that it is pulling away from.
Yeah. So I want to emphasize something because I think it's really important. The question, if you watch cable news or if you listen to President Trump, is, well, do you want Iran to have a nuclear weapon or not?
Yeah.
And there's been this assumption that's just been accepted that they were sprinting towards a weapon, that they were weeks away or months away or only a year away from having nuclear weapons. There is simply no public evidence that exists that indicates that's the case. Our own intelligence community said, no, it is our assessment that they are not pursuing a nuclear weapon. And if they were to begin, that it would take 3 years before they even were to achieve that. But we see no sign that they are. Now we have the IAEA Director General coming out and saying the same. We don't have proof of any sort of systematic effort by Iran to pursue a nuclear weapon. This was on CNN. Let's take a listen.
I go again to the beginning of my comment. These things we don't know, because if there was some activity which was clandestine or hidden or away from our inspectors, we couldn't know. What we informed and what we reported was that we did not have, as in coincidence with some of the sources you mentioned there, that we did not have any proof of a systematic effort to move into a nuclear weapon.
So let's be really clear what we're talking about here. They're using nuclear weapon development as a pretext. That is not what this is about. This is about regime collapse. The Israelis have been pretty upfront about it. All the cheerleaders are, cheering on regime change in Iran. You could put this A5 up on the screen. You actually had a satellite that was hacked in Iran for their state-run television. And what they played was this anti-regime messaging videos calling for people to rise up and, for freedom and revolution against the regime. I mean, it kind of gives up the game that this is the ultimate goal, which again, they're not really making particularly hard to figure out based on the military targets that we've already seen. If it's all just about the nuclear program, why are you striking all these, why are you hitting all these targets in Tehran? Okay, number one. And number two, they out and out say it. I mean, Bibi talked about, hey, it'd be great if that was the result, is ultimately a regime collapse. That's what we're contemplating here. Don't be distracted by this question, they're racing towards a nuclear weapon. There is no evidence that's the case. The reason this is happening now is because Bibi was able to convince Trump to go along with it, and they're using the nuclear weapons as a pretext to try to effectuate regime collapse. That's where we are.
Yes, and look, on the IAEA front, there's actually it's really worth going into this because this will be the pretext under which all of this is launched. Let's remember this right now. There are three principal actors who are involved in the conflict: Israel, the United States, and Iran. Two of them are IAEA compliant and or members. One of them is not. It's called Israel, okay, just so we're all aware, which is in direct violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It's an undeclared nuclear power with hundreds of nuclear warheads under its command and control, independent of the United States of America. So are we really going to allow a non-compliant NPT and IAEA member to attack another for not being in compliance with the IAEA. It's preposterous. It
Right.
makes absolutely zero sense. And look, I mean, this is a case that the Vice President, J.D. Vance, made on Twitter. He's citing the IAEA. He's talking about non-compliance, about civilian enrichment. Iran, as a member of the IAEA, has the actual right, because of its acquiescence to those, to at least have some level of enrichment. Now, we can quibble about the highly enriched uranium, etc., for civilian purposes, nuclear medicine and nuclear power. This is really getting in the weeds. But the bottom line is clear. IAEA, of which at least has some limited visibility into the program, says it's not happening. The United States intelligence community, Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, as of 3 months ago, said that they are not close to a nuclear weapon. I also point everybody to the original announcement, because these things should live in history and words matter. Benjamin Netanyahu, even in his bullshit intelligence world, said they could be a few months to a few years. He does not even offer that they are days away from a nuclear weapon, which begs the question, why couldn't we allow just the next day, 24 hours later, to allow Iranian diplomats to meet with United States diplomats? I know that none of this will ultimately matter at the White House level, but for the historical record, like, I want people to know, on Iraq, the Bush administration made its case. Now, its case was bullshit, but they went to great lengths to manufacture the intelligence. Remember Curveball, Niger, Yellow Cake, the National Intelligence Estimate, where Dick Cheney was driving over to the CIA and basically forcing them to make their own conclusion. But they had a document, right?
Yeah.
They had a document, which was, it's BS, but they had Colin Powell present his case to the world. They had this fake intelligence that they presented to the United States Congress. And look, you know, you have to give them credit. One of the reasons, again, they survive is because the entire Democratic and Republican establishment bought into the lie of the Iraqi nuclear program. Here, they don't even, they don't even try. They're just like, trust us, right?
Yeah.
Trump literally said, I don't care what she said. That's extraordinary.
About Tulsi Gabbard,
about Tulsi Gabbard,
Director of National Intelligence.
I mean, here again, you know, Bush held up his, I'm forgetting the guy's name, is George something, the CIA director at the time, George Tenet, that's his name, and he's dragging his ass out before Congress and before the media and Condoleezza Rice. I mean, they had all of this fake intel again, but at the time it seemed real to a lot of people, and that was part of the legitimacy of this. In this case, it's just trust Donald Trump, trust the word of Benjamin Netanyahu, and when you look at the entire public record, it is complete bullshit.
Yep.
And that is the part where, you know, you put together the Israeli action here, you put together, you know, the very basis of this attack. Oh, we have to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. This is honestly worse than Iraq. I really believe that.
Well, because here's the other thing is, and they know this is part of the calculus. The actions that have been taken create a logic that makes it much more likely that they do race towards a bomb. The reason these attacks launched when they did is not because the diplomacy wasn't working. It's because the diplomacy was working, because it did have a chance at succeeding. And there's no way that the Hawks could allow that, because they want this war. So that's why we are where we are.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.